Okay, this is my video for the Literary Summary 3 assignment. I chose the article Pacing Lessons for Optimal Learning. Author's purpose first. The author's purpose was to describe the importance of effective pacing and how to implement it to educators. So basically, he wanted to describe to educators and teach us how important pacing was for student activity. And, for students to stay concentrated and focused on the topic at all times. So you can't have it too fast or too slow. Okay, a little bit of evidence for these author's purpose. There's a correlation between effective pacing and student engagement. So basically, if you have too high of a pace, students will become frazzled and they won't be able to keep up with the lesson plan. And if you're too slow, students will start to become bored and they'll stop paying attention. So putting their heads on tables and stuff like that. So it's important to find that nice little middle ground that they stay focused and don't get bored, but they can still keep up. Another thing he said that describes his author's purpose was that he collaborates with individual teachers in problem solving to improve or enhance their instruction. So he has sit downs and meetings with these personal meetings with teachers to help them enhance their instruction. So this is basically telling him that he's qualified to tell us how to pace our lesson plans. Another thing that he tells us as for the why this article being made is the author's purpose. He tells us an example, and it's that teaching in person versus virtual. The difference in that kind of teaching and that kind of pacing. Virtual pacing, you need to be much more precise and much more fast because students get bored a lot easier because there's way more distractions in a virtual setting for teaching because they're in their own homes. Moving on to central focus, the best way I could describe it for this article specifically was understanding the need and methods to differentiate pacing in different settings when making a lesson plan. So basically that just means for what specific reasons do you have to make a lesson plan faster or shorter paced? Or not faster or shorter paced, faster or slower paced. For example, as I just said, virtual versus in-person. Virtual is not more distractions. It's more just giving the kids the content they need to learn so that they can do it in their own time. That's why these classes in virtual settings are only 15 minutes at most. I remember my COVID year, all my classes were about 20 minutes. They gave us the work, they gave us the bare minimum, the skeleton outline of what we needed to know, and then they just set us free. Because they knew we weren't going to pay attention, and we probably weren't paying attention anyways. I wasn't. For sure I wasn't. This article also tells us that while we're planning our lessons, to just keep pacing in mind, especially when we're planning activities, like group activities and activities in pairs. These take up a lot more time, so we have to get the information out in the time allotted, and then we have to give them 15, 20, 25 minutes for them to complete these group activities. He also teaches us to adjust pacing to meet the needs of the audience. So, say you have a class that has, maybe a slower learning pace. You're going to have to go into more detail with each fact, whereas if you have a bunch of gifted and talented students, you can kind of skim through the simple stuff and get to the meat and potatoes a lot faster. You just have to, it's just knowing your audience. You know what I mean? A bunch of scaredy cats aren't going to want to watch a horror movie. It's the same thing with teaching. If you have a bunch of kids that learn a little bit more slowly, you have to be gentle with them. You can't throw them into the deep end. The last example that I thought was necessary to talk about was slow pacing signals. This is what he focuses on near the end of the article. He's basically just telling us a bunch of examples of ways we can spot how our pacing was too slow and the kids are getting bored. So as I said previous, you know, head in their arms, laying down, looking around, looking at their phone, reading a book, drawing, all the things that says like they're disinterested in the lesson. It's more likely that the lesson is just dragging on too long and they haven't gotten any hands-on work to use. All right, finishing up with some reflections and applications, just like raw reactions to the article. We've been going over pacing throughout making our lesson plan. You know, throughout assignment A, we've been talking about, hey, you have too many objectives, or you have too big of a central focus. You know, this has to fit in one 50-minute time. We don't have time for too much stuff. You have time to teach like one thing and then do an assignment on one thing and then maybe start another, and that's about it. You know, that's what pacing is. So looking at this article, it's not really anything new. It's just more cementing something that we've already been taught by you. What I didn't take into account is the virtual aspect of teaching. I hope to God that never happens. I remember in high school, one of my teachers, she got completely burnt out throughout COVID year just because it was such a horrible experience. And it was just such a different way to teach. You know, trying to fit 20 minutes with 50 minutes of information it must have been so frustrating. As well as now in high school, I remember even when I was a senior, whenever you weren't at school, you had to watch like the 50-minute video that they made, like when they were normally teaching, and that's terrible too. You know, sitting through 50 minutes of video, no kid's actually gonna do that. They're just gonna skim it and say they did it, and then write whatever they have to write so that they can get out of, you know, failing that assignment. Adjusting pacing to meet needs of the audience is something I wanted to focus on too, because it's not something that I'll get out like right away. Like even when I start student teaching, it's gonna take me a few days to learn my class, like learn how quickly everyone learns and how they learn differently, you know, like different methods that they learn. You know, some people are auditory, some people are sight, some people are hands-on. I'm hands-on. So that's going to be very interesting, but that's really more of just like a watch and see. Like it'll take, like, give me 3 days and I'll be like, okay, this kid learns like this kid learns like this one might need a little help. I can probably trust this one to get through it on his own, as long as I give him a few minutes to ask questions. Lastly, for reflection, correlation between effective pacing and student engagement. That just feels kind of obvious. Like, yeah, if you have good pacing, the students will be engaged for the majority of the lesson. You know, it just makes sense. You know, too fast pacing, they don't understand, less engaged. Too slow, they get bored. They're like, oh my gosh, why are we listening to all this? Yeah, it's so obvious. Less engaged. Perfect. Okay, this video is already 9 minutes long, so I'll try to wrap this up quickly. For application, I'll just keep it in mind. Like I said in the reflection part of this video, you know, it's gonna take me a few minutes to learn like how everyone learns and how at different paces everyone learns. So I have to keep that in mind. But I will have the senior teacher there with me that'll help give me notes like after classes and stuff like that. And then I'll just have to use my sources, like you, for example, Flynn, Matthews, Peterson, really any of the teachers in the education department or in any department, because they're all teachers. I can just like ask them notes. I'm like, I'm having trouble with this kid, or this kid learns so much slower than these people. How do I keep these people interested in the topic while also making sure this kid doesn't fall behind? That's my biggest fear, is that one of the kids will fall behind, but the rest of the class is doing so well that I won't want to change the pace of my lesson. But then I'll have to keep him or her integrated so that she learns too, because I'm not going to just leave a kid behind. But that's all I have.